El Clásico went about the way I thought it would, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It's easy to fall into the trap of using a game like this, Barcelona against Real Madrid, the stakes are at its highest, as a referendum on a manager, on a team, and on individual players. And I do try, as people have been giving me a pretty nice compliment for this, thank you, that I try to be as unbiased as possible. But unfortunately, coupling this with the two Inter results from the last 2 weeks has me thinking some big picture stuff. And that does mean some consequences for important players in the squad. In the same way, the concept of luck and being unlucky, not feeling like you have VAR on your side, and just feeling like if certain players did certain things just a little bit better, you're close. You're closer than you think you are. That feeling is also pervasive. So I'm having a bit of internal debate as to how I even take a stand on so many of these issues. But I'll try my best because here are the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 3-1 loss to Real Madrid in El Clásico. One is exactly what we thought. It's unfortunate that I could have predicted the way that these goals were going to be scored, the way that it was going to go down. Now, even the expected goals, I could have expected that Barcelona was going to outplay Real Madrid for large stretches of this contest, and Barcelona were going to feel hard done by. The expected goals tonight, 2.38 for Barcelona, 1.47 for Real Madrid, which as we know is not reflected in the scoreline. But the way that these teams took control of the game and what they did when they had control, that is where this scoreline makes a bit of sense. The first goal kind of summed it up. The second one was more of the first, but the first goal sums it up where Pedri gets an interception, gets forward for the first and only time, really only time in that first half. And when Real Madrid take possession in their own 18, it's off to the races. Busquets tries to pull back Toni Kroos when he was going forward, and even for what it should have been a yellow card for Busquets, instead, Kroos gets the ball off to Vinny Jr., and for the third or fourth time in a matter of a few minutes, he was against Roberto 1v1. Ter Stegen did get the save, is going to feel hard done by, but of course Benzema, it falls perfectly in his path. A little bit of what we expected was going to go wrong with Barcelona's defense in transition, and a little bit of luck going Real Madrid's way. And that was the formula, that was the recipe that Los Blancos were able to hang their hat on. That they were good enough to make their own luck, and Barcelona's defensive frailties were going to bite them in the butt, just as I predicted. And again, that's not to say that Barcelona didn't have some of their chances. They were better in the second half, but even in the first, there was that stretch of about 3 minutes right after the goal was scored, totally had lost control of the match, but then they did calm down and answer with a few chances. There was a ton of offsides for Barca in the game, but that Lewandowski attempt at the far post, Rafinha from distance, and Roberto's cross from Dembélé that should have been for Pedri. Dani Carvajal, also if the ref had an eye on it, probably pushed Dembélé in the back, but Dembélé not only did not sell it well enough, but I don't think it was enough for the referee to overturn something. More on that in a second. And so those 3 chances in a matter of a few minutes remind you that Barcelona did have opportunities in this game. If that Ansu Fati shot late on is a few inches to the left, I don't think Lamine gets that. And this is a 2-2 draw instead of what we saw. So as bad as it may be for Barcelona, this has been the theme in the last 3 weeks. That Barcelona are better than they were a season ago, even though Xavi is one of the losingest managers that Barcelona have ever had to start a managerial campaign. Barcelona are playing on paper in a better way. That's why in the Liga, they still very much have a chance because they get points after points against teams that are at their level or below their level because they do control these matches and they do have enough individual talent to get the job done. But as we've seen this season, and was a theme the last season as well, the minute that competition goes up just that next level, when you're playing against the best of the Premier League or the Bundesliga or Serie A or even the Liga in Real Madrid, then Barcelona's frailties, their weaknesses, their issues all get exposed. So this is what I say when I say exactly what we thought, that Barcelona are who they are right now. This is a project still in progress, a squad that is incomplete, and they're just where they are to contend for the Liga, yes, but I don't know how reasonable trophies are this season if they can't get over that hump. They've got one more shot at Real Madrid this season. They're 3 points back, but both of these two giants will likely miss out on points this year. The whole game changed with Ron Araujo healthy. Bet that. Because you can either put him at right back instead of Roberto, or he could have been the center back in for Eric Garcia. And continuing that theme of exactly what we thought, and I don't mean to make an excuse, but it has to still be reiterated. Without one of your best 2 defenders, and without Koundé and Araujo for the last few weeks, Barcelona's defense kind of stunk, as I would expect on paper that it would. I want to thank OneFootball for sponsoring this video. OneFootball is the app that I use to stay up to date on everything FC Barcelona. But more importantly, because you know I'm watching every minute of Barcelona action, it does help me stay up to date with all the teams that Alemany might be scouting and looking at players for the next big transfer window. With a custom tailored homepage, Stay up to date with breaking news, live scores, and even transfer news. While on the go, you can check with matches in live time and watch those La Liga highlights afterwards. And especially if you're in a place defending the good name of La Liga against other teams. Say in the UK and Ireland, you can watch La Liga highlights on the go and let them know that it's not just Real Madrid and Barcelona, regardless of what the table says. So use a link down in the description below for a free download of the OneFootball app on Android or iOS to put all your football in one place. And they also help out a tiny Barca channel like this one too. Thanks again to OneFootball. Now back to all things FC Barcelona. Headline 2 is pass and move. We're going to pick it up just a little bit. I went on that long rant there, but picking up the actual tactics of this game, it was unfortunate because Toni Kroos was arguably the man of the match. Fede Valverde as a right winger, really good. Luka Modric doing his thing. And Tchouaméni, gosh, that one hurt. And that's how the second goal was scored too. And that kind of sums it up. That one team did it well, that being Madrid in possession on the counterattack. They passed and they moved and they seemed to be really fluid. Something that we expect from Barcelona. Something that we expect from total football and Johan Cruyff and Pep Guardiola and this whole legacy of Barcelona. And yet Real Madrid are doing it in a better way than Barcelona are, and almost vice versa, the way Barcelona are relying on their wingers, relying on this individual talent to get results. It is weird feeling like that is flipped, and it's certainly not what I signed up for. Because on that second goal, Madrid can get a little bit lucky for the ball to fall into the path of Vini Jr. You could call it another mistake from Eric Garcia on that deflection, but the fact that there was two Barcelona players and Vini Jr. was in the middle of them, and yet somehow the ball still falls into his path, I do chalk that up to bad luck. More on Eric Garcia later. And because Tchouaméni came forward, Madrid had a numerical advantage right at the edge of the penalty box. Benzema had gone wide, and that left Valverde coming in from a wing wide open. But even before that, they didn't pick up any of the movement. And all it took was one run from Tchouaméni to unbalance Barcelona's back line completely. And by back line, I mean their midfield line and their back line. The forwards weren't really tracking either, as Real Madrid again struck on the counter. Headline 3 is referendum on Busquets, because kind of going with that pass and move, in Barcelona's offensive third, Busquets has his role. Pedri has his role. Frankie de Jong has his role. When Frank Kessié comes on, he does different things, so he has his role. And that's why he's not playing, because he doesn't fit necessarily what Xavi wants to do right now. Gabi has his role as well. And that lack of fluidity, that lack of being able to cover for one another, that lack of having those midfield runs come in, especially if you have wingers, for numerical advantages coming in. Look at that goal that was scored against Inter Milan. The minute Sergio Roberto, as an inverted right back, made a forward run, Barcelona get on the board. And what was worrying about this is that Real Madrid know exactly what Barcelona are going to do. And of course, after a decade, they know Sergio Busquets almost better than his Barcelona teammates do. There was a sequence late in the first half where 3 times in a matter of a minute, Benzema came from behind as Modric was trying to face guard Busquets from the front. It was Kroos who was dealing with de Jong, and it was Tchouaméni who was dealing with Pedri. So Benzema and Modric enact this double team on Busquets. And again, 3 times in a matter of a minute, Benzema comes in, almost dispossesses him. Busquets every time gets out of trouble. Eventually, he does get fouled and actually ran into the box to head it over for an attempt to Lewandowski. And that kind of summed up what it was for Busquets. He kept getting himself out of trouble, except when he didn't. And right now, he's not in form good enough where his ball playing is making up for the frailties on the counterattack. And it's not even about the space. It's about role and understanding that the other team has every notion as to where Busquets wants to go next. And sometimes, yes, his footwork and his magic get him out of trouble. A lot of times it does. And it's what helps Barcelona control a match. So Barcelona might lose some control. But defensively, they have no control whatsoever. And I'm not going to blame Pedri, of course. And it feels like, yes, we have to assign blame somewhere. But I almost have to be accountable to myself to say that Busi at this point, it's what I kind of said in the beginning of the season and what didn't happen. And why Tchouaméni signing for Real Madrid hurt so gosh darn much. Because Tchouaméni for Barcelona, if you had switched the two, then Barca probably win this match. And that is kind of disparaging for Busquets. Because as I was kind of saying this season, and now I've kind of changed my tune, Barcelona are better with him on the field, yes. And they're a better team 75% of the time than their opponent when Busi is your lone pivot. But we have now seen, and I think this is the referendum, that against those elite teams now, whether it's age or form, it can't be Busi anymore. And because of that stalemate with Frankie de Jong, with his contract being too much, he's too expensive for what he gives Barcelona, so obviously they want to offload him, so they can't give him the keys to Busquets' position for the long term. I don't know what the other option is for this season is. If you want to compete and have the best results this year, it might have to be Frankie de Jong as the pivot, but how many big games do you have left? I mean, I guess most of them now, right? Against Villarreal, that becomes a must-win game. Bayern Munich is obviously must-win, but it might not even be if Inter Milan get a result against Victoria Pilsen earlier in the day. And then El Clásico, of course, against Real Madrid the second time around. Atletico Madrid, Athletic Club, there are still huge matches to be done. And I think Frankie de Jong should probably start in those matches. Unless something else changes, I don't know if it's age. It's not about speed. It's not about athleticism. But it might just be form. And it could be that he's lost a half a step as well. But I have defended Busi for a long time. And I said over the summer that Barcelona, they needed to get some kind of replacement. And I want it to be Tchouaméni. But instead, he goes to Real Madrid. And Real Madrid's midfield is dynamic and knows exactly what they're trying to do. The minute Cruz is done, again, he was probably the man of the match today for them. But the minute he's done, they're going to part with him because his contract is movable. And Casemiro was the same way, where Man United offered him a lot of money. And Tchouaméni was coming in. The writing was on the wall and he was gone. And this is kind of a reminder, too, that it's not about the individuals, but it's about that salary structure. That this project, the financial recovering, is going to take a long time because of the contracts of Alba and Piqué and Busquets and De Jong, more so than even the individuals. If they made a third of what they make or half of what they make, then they're fine in this squad. All of them make sense. But those contract negotiations, everything off the field, or lack thereof, I should say, and how much they make, makes this whole squad and this whole thing just a complete mess. 4 is no luck with VAR. I was pretty adamant against Inter Milan, the Champions League, somehow even worse than this, but I think those two bad calls, and you know what I'm talking about, Lewandowski getting shoved down by Carvajal, and then Eric Garcia barely gracing the top of the foot of Rodrigo, and him going down for the PK that made it 3-1. Those two calls, in isolation, I guess there's an argument for both that, Carvajal was just awful with his pushing and his shoving. He's a gnat. He's just like Jordi Alba, of course, on the other side, and he should have been called for something today. He wasn't. But if you're not even going to look at the monitor for Lewandowski's, then how could you go to the monitor and call that and overturn it against Eric Garcia? That's my argument. VAR seems to be inconsistent in the way that they go about the severity of these situations. Lewandowski needed to be relooked at. And if you said that it wasn't a penalty and you didn't see enough contact, you thought it was hip to hip, and Lewandowski was always going down, then I guess that's fair. I think if that's what the referee says, puts in this report, then that's what the line is. But then later in the game, where Barcelona are pushing for that equalizer, I know that the game situation is not supposed to matter, but in that situation, you're going to take the time to stop a game in stoppage time, go over to the monitor, and to call that minimal contact a penalty that puts the game away. I just have to disagree a bit with the circumstances of each of those calls. But I also can't say that I'm just crying over spilled milk. Because once more, it's about making your own luck. The Barcelona are putting themselves in a situation where they're almost relying on VAR to go their way. And every time it doesn't, then they're not getting the result. And that seems to be a theme this season. As I've said before, VAR in Spain this year has been rough. Elche, yesterday, holy moly. You think Barcelona fans are mad today? Be an Elche fan yesterday. So VAR has not been good in Spain. I don't know what it is. The level of play is down, and Spanish football over the course of this season has to look in the mirror. Because financially, Real Madrid is doing great. Their prize pig is doing well. They're winning the Champions League, and they speak for Spain. But the other 19 teams, there is something amiss, whether it's in VAR or whether it's in attendance, whatever it may be. Barca fans at least are showing up to the stadium, but La Liga and Javier Tebas, he has got to make this product better for next season. And 5 is Ansu in a moment. At least there was one positive. On the wings, Ferran Torres has been completely lost in the wilderness. He hasn't actually scored in Liga since the last Clásico, so he does it again in the biggest stage. Maybe Barcelona, for Ferran Torres to get his form, need to play Los Blancos every week. I wouldn't sign up for that. I don't want that. But for Ferran Torres, at least he found the back in that. I hope that gives him some confidence. But that goal really does go to Ansu, of course. Direct, gets that dribble going, full head of steam, and showing you just a flash again. And that is what Ansu's been, I think what he'll continue to be this season. So you blink, and Ansu has done something well. But there are going to be long stretches where he's not going to be able to find his form or do something in this game. But if he is fit enough, that's one of those other big changes. I know you cannot sit Rafinha. You can't pay that much money for a player that is so important to your team. A left-footed winger on the right side, supposed to come in and get some goals off and take long shots and unbalance the team. Rafinha is not it right now. And Dembélé, he has some poor performances. He has good performances. It seems like he has too much responsibility at times, and teams are doubling him and figuring out. And that's a tough thing with Dembélé. He was better on the left with Balde in the first half, but when he goes over to the right with Sergio Roberto behind him, as I've said, that partnership, even from the preseason, and even years past, it's just not working. Roberto is going to be looking inside to create a numerical advantage there, and so he's not overlapping Dembélé. And when that space isn't available, and that other midfielder has already shifted over, and then that other third midfielder, gets to go over and double Dembélé, then Roberto's stuck. It's got to be a ball back to him that he's going to have to recycle, and nobody is going and overlapping Dembélé. So now he's just going to get doubled on the wing on the right side. And that keeps happening over and over and over again. But unfortunately for Barcelona, I don't think Bellerin is going to be the answer when he's healthy either. Roberto today also had to deal with Vinny Jr., so he wasn't able to overlap because he knew he always had to stay back and defend. Because Rafinha on the right, defending was also poor today. That said, Ansu in a moment, I think for the long term as a club, I know they re-signed Dembele and Rafinha is going to be here for a while too. But Ansu has the highest ceiling of those three players. And I think Xavi would be best to invest a little bit in Ansu as a starter if he is 100% healthy. I know we're being conservative with him, and that's totally fine. But if he is healthy, with this kind of performance at least, he's earned a start. And Xavi should probably start moving forward with what his best version of his best players are, whatever that may be. So there it is, the 5 headlines from Real Madrid against Barcelona. The good thing is that I'm going to have tomorrow a podcast. I guess that's a good thing. I guess that's a bad thing. And then as I told you in the preview, you're not going to hear me for the Villarreal match, but I will be back next week. So don't go too far. Make sure you subscribe so you don't forget about me. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca.